Church planting. Let's get to the church planting section. I'm not going to go over it like in detail, but I feel like we need to talk about some principles of church planting. I've already alluded to this before, that I don't believe that we can plant churches. Can we turn this on? We can't plant churches, but we can plant the seed of God's Word in the hearts of people, and that is our job. The church planting itself, or church building, is the mandate of Jesus himself. I will build my church. But there's an amazing thing in the scripture, is that I learned that in Exodus chapter 3. When it's really an amazing text. What happened to my Bible? It's actually in my black bag, but if any Bible will do.
Where's the Bible?
Yeah. In Exodus 3, God came down to Moses after he had been in the desert for 40 years as a fugitive, ran away from Egypt from being killed, basically, because he had murdered an Egyptian to protect his people, for his zeal for his people. When Moses was tending the flock in chapter 3 of Exodus, of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, he was a pagan priest. That tells you that he married a heathen woman, a Midian daughter of a priest. And he led the flock to the back of the desert. Verse 2, and the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of the bush. Verse 3, then Moses says, I will now turn aside and see. Verse 4, when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here am I. Then he said, do not draw near this place. Verse 6, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face from the Lord for fear. Verse 7, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. You can see this today, that God has seen the oppression of the Syrians and the Pakistanis and the Afghans and any people that you care about. Who are your people, Elijah? You want to go to Jordan, was it, you said?
To begin with.
Yeah. Anyway, God says, I have seen the oppression, and I have heard their cry because of the slavery. Now, watch this verse, verse 8. God is speaking to Moses, says, I have seen the problem. Thank you, Tristan. Thanks. I have seen the problem, so what am I going to do about it? That's a very important principle. Please watch with me. So I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, and to that place of the Canaanites and the Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, and so on. So what did God say? I see the problem, I'm going to come and solve it, right? With the exact words again, I have come down to deliver. Then he tells him, now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen their oppression by the Egyptians. Verse 10. After God says, I'm coming down to do it, he says, come now therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh. How is he going to do that? How is God going to deliver? He says, you go. In the NIV it says, therefore go. Here it says, come and I will send you. In the same meaning. And then Moses said, oh no, come on, I'm 80 years old and I can't speak and all that stuff. And then finally God's anger burned against him for his rebellion. He said, you're going anyway. And he went. So by the same token, Jesus says, I will build my church. And then he says, you go. You go and do it. So yes, we are his hands. We are his mouth, his eyes, his ears, his feet. But it is really his work. I'm going as quickly as possible to go through this list. Stages in the church planting. And I am known as someone who likes to simplify complicated things. And some people say it in a critical way. Well, you're making it too simple. Well, it really is simple. At least that's my opinion and my experience. You ask me, how did I plant 5 churches in North Lebanon between the age of 14 and 18? Just got yesterday an invitation to dedicate the new building of the first church that I planted in North Lebanon, in the mountains. That's my mother's hometown. You ask me, how did I plant it? Well, I didn't go to Dallas Seminary. I didn't go to Gordon Conwell. I didn't go to Fuller to learn about church planting methods. I didn't even hear the term for church planting. When I started, I hardly could know English. And that's my experience. It's simple. You go tell people about the Lord, a number of them respond, you gather them together, you do a Bible study, teach them the Word, and it becomes a church. How difficult is that? Now, go to my library in my office, you see a whole shelf on church planting. They complicate things. It's so complicated. And one day I made a comparison. I made a pile of church planting books and a pile of evangelism discipleship books. And I saw this one is Bible-based. This side is more anthropology-based, sociology, anthropology-based. Because we are making church planting into a cultural issue rather than a spiritual issue. You're with me? Are you with me?
Yes.
I'm not saying culture is not important, society is not important, psychology is not important, or anthropology is not. I'm not saying all these are bad. But what is the power? What is the core? What is the main thing? Simply the gospel. And Jesus demonstrated that. And this is basically the model of Jesus. He was going around preaching, teaching, healing, minimizing the offense. And I wrote this especially for Western missionaries because a lot of people have a negative view of Westerners, and you need to minimize that. Also, they have a wrong view or bad view, negative view of Christianity. You want to minimize that. How do you do that? You need to be culturally sensitive. I'm for that. If there are wrong assumptions about you, you need to deal with them. One of them is they think Christians are not moral. It's incredible that Muslims accuse Christians of being immoral. After we hearing talk about muta marriage, incredible. I resisted the other day. I showed you a picture of a family, Saudi family. I told you the woman came to Christ, but her husband didn't. And you know why he didn't? He told me if I come to America, I will become a Christian. But he told her, if I become a Christian, I can't marry another woman, and I can't have muta marriage. Means have, many women in his life. So anyway, so we need to deal with wrong perceptions. And one of the most important thing is integrity in presenting ourselves. Not pretending you're a Muslim. It's horrible to pretend you're a Muslim. How can you, you're basically being ashamed of Jesus. If you're ashamed of me, I'll be ashamed of you. Maximizing the interest through friendship, genuine love, acts of kindness, moral integrity. Let people be impressed by your moral integrity. And here there's a note, attraction to Christ begins with attraction to us. You cannot attract people to Jesus and His love if you don't love them and they don't like you. Jesus was loved by the people because He cared for them and He loved them. You don't expect someone to love you if you don't love them. You start, you love, and then they'll love you back. Maybe. Maybe they'll love you back. Element of surprise. This is a very important principle for me. When you, there's this theory of begin where they are and then go from there. And the bridging idea is similar. Look at common things and begin with the common, with the familiar. I find that to be the opposite of the truth. This is a rumor, it's a cultural understanding. People always say those things, but they're not true. The most effective communication is when you bring something brand new and fresh and beautiful to people and make them say, ah, wow. And that's what happened with Jesus. People were amazed. If He had spoken the familiar, He would be like the Pharisees. There's nothing exciting about the Pharisees. And that's one reason they were angry with Jesus, because they were jealous of His popularity. People want to hear Jesus, they don't want to hear them. Here, let us talk to you about the Torah and the law of Moses. And people say, yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard that before. But Jesus says, you heard, but I tell you. I want to tell you something new and different and fresh. He awed people. Let's be exciting, guys. Forget about the Quran.
Amen.
Forget about Islam. And talk about Islam and Muhammad did this and didn't do this and the Quran says and this says that. You know why? Because they know that better than you. Why are you telling them this? Tell them something they don't know. If you have 5 minutes with somebody, you want to quote the Quran for them? Why don't you give them some exciting verse that says, God loves you. There's no fear in love. That's what attracted one of the Saudi believers. She read 1 John, where is it? 1 John 4:18. There's no fear in love. I was always afraid. Love, what's that about love? That's an element of surprise. Bilqis Sheikh, prominent noble woman, rich, wealthy Pakistani noble woman. Somebody said to her, when you pray to God, think of Him as your father and ask Him what you want. What? What? I never thought that God can be a father. And that's why she wrote the book, I Dared Call Him Father. I dared call Him Father. So we need an element of surprise. The element of surprise, I don't want to brag about my education, but I have to tell you that I studied neurology. I was going to be a psychiatrist at one time. I'm glad God saved me from that. But I studied neurology, and I studied also a degree in education. I don't care about degrees. I just love education. I love to learn all kinds of things. I've studied the functions of the brain, how the brain works, and brain mapping. Go Google that. You'll find a lot of stuff on it. Brain mapping. And also, I worked with handicapped people. I worked for 2 years as an intern in an autistic school of autism, and 2 years in a mental hospital. That's why I'm mental. And so I learned a lot from my doctors, from my professors, and about the functions of the brain and the learning process, the education process, learning process. And based on that, I say that it's better not to dwell on the common ground things. Not at all. Why? I did a study in trilingualism. If you want to see that study, it's in biblical missiology under the topic of Bible translation. Because I'm a Bible translator, I'm a linguist. Psycholinguistics is my education. I've done also other things, but psycholinguistics. So I did a study on trilingualism in Lebanon, because Lebanese are at least trilingual, and then they learn more. Arabic, French, and English. So I wanted to see what happens in the brain when somebody is immersed in a language or learning it through translation. Like a teacher, like here in high school, my kids studied French in high school, and it's an American teacher who would hardly speak French, teaching them by telling them in English what the French word means. But if you were to go into France and nobody tells you anything in English, you only learn French, it goes a different part of your brain. But if you are learning French through English, it goes into the English language segment in your brain. It's called brain mapping. So there's a little circle there for English language. And then Spanish or French or Japanese or anything. If you learned it through translation, it stays in the English language segment. But if you go to Korea and nobody knows any English, I was in Korea, I don't know when, 6 weeks ago or something. My wife and I spent 8 days there, and here's my brag. In one day I learned the Korean language, and I was able to read. But I didn't understand. I just said, oh, you know Korean, when did you learn it? Yesterday. But anyway, so if you don't know, if the people who are teaching you don't know any English and they only speak Korean, it goes in a different segment of the brain. We don't use more than 10% of the brain. And so there are lots of spaces for new learning. So how is that helpful in evangelism? When you go to a Muslim, tell them something new, let them start a new way of thinking, a different circle in their brain. If you talk about Isa and the Quran and so, they're still seeing Christianity through Islamic eyes. But let them see something new. Oh, tell me more about this. And that's the element of surprise. So after all this exposure, now I want to respond to Brother Simon. He says, can we do public ministry in a restricted country? We have to pray about this. Lord, help me know how to answer this question. And I don't want to be facetious. I want to be real with you. Okay? If Jesus said, follow my example, we have no right to not follow his example. If he and Paul and Peter, in a very, very aggressive, adversarial culture, went public, we need to go public. And unless we go public, the church will always be a little home fellowship somewhere in a corner of a street. Unless Christ is publicly announced through all kinds of means. Thankfully now we have media, we have the internet, we have TV, we have YouTube, we have Facebook, and you can Google Horizons and find, messages and so on. And Muslims are reading these. And lately I told you about this Libyan woman lives in California who saw me on a YouTube channel. Now she follows me. Last week I preached at the Arabic church, and this week she told me, I listened to your message. I didn't even send her the link. She went looking for it herself. But let's not hide behind media. There are a lot of people say, well, my ministry is media. I'm struggling with some people on my staff who says, my calling is media. I said, no, your calling is not media. Your calling is people. And if you don't go and meet with people and face-to-face with them, tell them about Jesus and the Christian life and so on, you're hiding, you're using media as a cop-out. You're using prayer as a cop-out. Pray and don't go. Media and don't talk to anybody. But anyway, thank God for media. Media has made a huge difference. The seed has been planted widely now, very thinly, all over the world. It's hardly a home that does not have Al-Hayat TV or Al-Karma TV. We have 20 Arabic channels. When I was beginning with this Bible translation thing, we started with Middle East Publications in Beirut, a small little office with 4 of us working there. And we said, we're going to conquer the Middle East with the gospel. How are we going to do that? And one guy did it this way, one guy did it, so we spread and did different things. I took Bible translation. Terry Ascott from England took Sat 7, and we started that together. And now, Sat 7 in the beginning, just over 20 years ago, had only 4 hours a week rented space on TV station from Cyprus. No Arab TV would carry Christian Arabic programming. And now it's several channels, Sat 7 Arabic, Farsi, Turkish, and also Sat 7 USA, or North America actually, not USA. And there are only 1 of 20 Christian channels in Arabic. So media is great, YouTube is great. One of my talks on YouTube, which I did for Sat 7, but they have a YouTube version, in 1 week had 117,000 views. So praise God for all that. But it cannot replace the personal. Nobody comes to Christ through dreams. Dreams only point to Christ. Nobody comes to Christ through media without someone helping. Sarah watched Al-Hayat, but then she got on Pal Talk, and an Iraqi guy in Michigan, I hope you'll meet him soon. You want me to call him, tell him to come and see you? And he was able to lead her. So you need a personal relationship. So did I lose my train of thought? Yeah, if Jesus did it publicly, and we cannot say he was safe, he was killed. And he could have been killed many times had it been God's will, or had it been the time. It says it's not the time. It wasn't the time yet. Sometimes he escaped because he knew physically he cannot escape. He cannot fight with them. So he escaped, ran away, because the time had not come. But he ended up being killed. How to do it publicly is the question. not weather, not weather. So, does that mean you need to stand on a ladder in Mecca and get arrested and killed or jailed? No. This is how I see it. Brother Simon, that's for you. The others, you can close your eyes, but keep your ears open. Wherever you are, let's take one of you. Who wants to be a volunteer? You want to be a volunteer? You're in Tunis. You're in Sousse. I've been in your home. Thank you for that great meal. You're in Sousse. You come across people, right? You're one little body. You're actually not very little. But we human beings are little. Puff up yourself a little bit. Eat some more of Edie's food. You only have responsibility for the people around you. You have neighbors, you meet somebody on a train station, bus station, in the marketplace. And be yourself in front of those people. Don't hide your identity. And let me tell you, those who are afraid of being kicked out of a country. So what if you get kicked out of a country? No big deal. But also, I think, and I know from experience with me and others, you're safer being who you are. Remember Andre alluded to that? There was this missionary clown. He wasn't a clown, but he was a missionary clown. In Lebanon, pretending he's a Muslim follower of Jesus. He had 45 staff in that organization, which you know about, and you know about. And they are all secretive, and they wouldn't share phone numbers with anybody, and don't you contact me, don't you call me, because maybe they're tapping our call. And they're so fearful and afraid. The secret police is after them. What? Why aren't you who you say you are? I thought you were touring the country. How come you are doing some really secret things? And then they ended up saying, out. They kicked out the whole team, 45 people. They gave them, I don't know, a few days or a couple of weeks, I don't remember. They kicked them out. And then people who are boldly witnessing, they're still there. The governments know who you are. I was called by the secret police in Cairo one day. They sent me 2 soldiers to my door. They took me to the secret police. And do you know something? I had nothing to fear. I have stood by, I've had even guns in my face and I do not fear. We have no reason to fear. I have to admit, after I was kidnapped and went away, walked a couple blocks away, that's when I started fearing. As I was shaking like this. I said I walked, I was driving actually, and then I parked on the side and I was shuddering and my mouth was going, I did not know, but when I was being kidnapped, I was not afraid. But later on, the aftermath, thought, you know, they could have killed me. But that's the only time I remember I really was afraid. There's no reason to fear, no reason at all, in faith. Yes?
So you're in immigration coming into a country. They asked you, what's the purpose of your visit?
Well, this is a good question. There's a legal purpose and there is a personal purpose. For example, when I go to teach in Hong Kong, if I say I'm going for business, I need a business visa. I don't need a visa. Actually, Hong Kong allows it right now, but I can't go to China without a visa, can I? As a US?
Yes, you can.
Anyway, some countries, many countries, if you say, I'm going for business, you need a business visa. Even the US. If you say, I want a tourist visa, does not mean you're only going to look around all the 24 hours. Oh, they will watch you, see, are you watching everything? I'm a tourist. No, you can do everything else except not earn money from the government. So you can talk about your faith, you can talk about your shoes, the latest watch. You can do anything you want. But legally, you're a tourist. So are you going as a tourist? Are you going to be employed? These are the two main categories in any country. So basically, it's about taxes, about are you stealing jobs from the people? So try to understand the intent of why they ask you this question. So I go as a tourist. But I had a guy, Jim Rarick, who was on staff in Kentucky. When he was here in training as an intern, and then he became a leader of the internship, helped develop it, he felt he wants to go to Malaysia for 2 or 3 weeks. So I gave him contacts with different organizations, people I know personally, some of them friends. It's a long story, I'm not going to go through it all. But he wrote the contacts, and they said, no, we can't see you, don't talk to us, and don't associate with us, and please don't write us, and wipe us out of your email list, and so. So he experienced fear, because they were basically spreading a message of fear to him, and he had not been in Malaysia before. He started panicking. And one day, he literally broke into my office. Like, normally people either knock or just open slowly and say, oh, can I see you? He just, and just went flat on the floor, started sobbing and crying and shaking. I said, what happened to this guy? I left my desk and I sat on the floor next to him, put my hand on his head and prayed for him, said, Jim, what's going on? He says, I'm having a panic attack. I'm afraid. I'm going to Malaysia. What am I going to do? What's going to happen to me? And so he calmed down, and then we prayed and we talked, and he got a little bit bolder later, and he said, shall I go? I said, I don't know. You have to ask God. Do you feel called to go? If you're not called to go. And then after a few days, he and his wife talked about it and prayed, and he said, oh, how silly of me to be so afraid. And, the Lord worked on his fear. So he applied for a visa, and they said, purpose, and he says, preaching the gospel. If he had asked me, I would have said, say tourist, come on. But he wrote, preaching the gospel. He says, I want to test it. I want to see. And if they deny me, fine. I'll be rid of this fear stuff. And they gave him a visa. They gave him a tourist visa. The thing is, in Malaysia, there are Chinese Christians, Indian Christians, more than Muslims. There's half, 51%, I don't know. But there's a lot of churches. You would go drive around churches. I went to the biggest library, bookstore in Kuala Lumpur, and I saw a huge section, as big as this room, of Christian materials and Bibles and many translations. And then we have missionaries. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that verse that you quoted yesterday. What's that? What? Proverbs 28:1.
Oh, the righteous, the wicked flee.
The wicked flee. No one is chasing you. Come on. Why are you afraid? No one is running after you to capture you and kill you. And yet you're so fearful. It's just no sense. It makes no sense at all. In 2006, I was invited to speak to a men's retreat in Turkey, in Afyon, beautiful resort, beautiful hotel. And we had 3 days together, and it was 129 men, exactly, 129 men, all missionaries from different organizations. And Bill, I want to dig out that, I probably gave you that. I want to put it sometime on our website so people hear it. I talked the whole time about boldness. And I addressed these people. I said, I know many of you are shuddering in fear in a country that is trying to join the EU, and they're trying to prove to the EU that they don't persecute Christians. And yet you're so afraid, you're not going out on the streets and taking advantage of the freedom and the openness in Turkey. And my son Andre was with me on that trip. He was living in Lebanon. He came over to Turkey. And Seth Wilson, some of you may know him. He's now in Thailand, a missionary in Thailand. He was on staff with us. And he also came. And I had Ashley, who is our director of member care of Horizons. She came, and I had others, and we spent a week on the streets sharing the gospel. We had a table with Bibles, and people were walking, hundreds of people walking through, back and forth, picking up gospels, and then some of them didn't have time to talk to us. Some of them stood and said, can we talk? And we led people to Christ and so on. And then I go to this conference, and people say, we can't do anything. We can't distribute the scripture. We can't. I say, come on, open your eyes and see the harvest is ripe. People everywhere are seeking the Lord, and you're hiding the gospel inside you. Go public with it. Go public. When we were in Morocco with Barbara, remember the prayer conference? And the guy said, let's not witness, let's just pray. I thought, what if I were leading this meeting, and I would say to the 400 missionaries there who spent about $2 million to get there, I'd say, hey, let's go cause some trouble. Let's just go outside and fill your bags with Bibles and spread around this country as fast as you can and distribute the scripture before you're caught and kicked out. Make every opportunity, take advantage of every minute that you can be free to talk to people, spread the gospel, and let them arrest you, and let it be in the newspaper the next day that 400 missionaries came and they were boldly speaking about their faith, and here now they are in the Moroccan jails, and the whole world knows about it. News in Japan of Japanese Christians who came to Morocco. Let it be known that Christians are willing to die for Christ, for Christ's sake. Let them know that we mean what we say. A little chickeny missionary cannot leave behind lions.
Amen.
And do you know Satan is not a lion?
Nope.
What does the Bible say about him? He says, like a lion, or as a lion. He pretends to be a lion. But he is like my little dog, whom I don't have anymore, who used to terrorize the neighborhood. Was very little. Like she was a little dog, but she had a very big voice. And nobody would dare go in. They had to ring the bell, knock, knock, and wait for me to. But if you were to go while he's attacking you, if you go one step, he'll run away. That's how Satan is. You resist him, he'll run away. He'll run away. So this brother Jim ended up going to Malaysia. And the first day he was there, he led 2 Malaysians to the Lord. And he's been again many times. We need to be public. Without public exposure, we have no message to give. And as I said earlier, the governments know you're a Christian. They don't mind you being Christian. There's no rule against being a Christian if you are a Christian in any country. But they just don't want you to cause trouble. And most of the governments are not worried about you converting Muslims to Christianity as much as not you conspiring against the government. Even China, their concern is more political than religious. And in order to thwart any political uprising, they thwart any groups that would meet in secret, whether they're Christians or atheists or whatever they are, even if they are communists, but they are against the government or they're not in the system. So try to understand it. Don't be so afraid. Jesus and Paul demonstrated that their popular public witness was a safety valve. Do you know how? There is a comment in the Gospels and says they were afraid to capture him from the crowd. They were afraid of the crowd. So when something, it has happened before, where they arrest somebody and they kill them in private. Nobody knows anything about it in Iran. They put them in jail, they're waiting sentencing, and then they kill them. And nobody knows anything about it. But when it becomes public, you've seen so many people released from jail because it became public. And governments today, including Saudi Arabia, do not want to give the impression they're oppressing other religious groups. I have heard Saudi leaders on Saudi TV. I listen to Saudi TV every day to understand what's going on. And Saudi leaders are saying, we want to promote tolerance toward the Shiites, Christians, and Jews, and everybody else. This is happening today. They're trying to demonstrate to the world that they have freedom. They're not oppressing. Of course, if they could get away with it, they will do under the table all kinds of terrible things. But that's at least, so take advantage of the freedom and go public and give the gospel mass exposure. Did we skip session time? I'm not looking, yes.
How do you answer the question directly, are you a missionary? And how cooperative would you be when questioned by police about your activities or who else might be missionaries?
Let me tell you that I doubt anyone will ask you this question. Because what are you there for? If you're teaching, you're a teacher. If you have a business, I'm a business. If you're a tourist, I'm a tourist. You don't have to say I'm a missionary. And I'm not saying you need to go say, hey, you guys, I'm a Christian. Do you hear? Do you hear? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying don't hide who you are, whether you're asked or not asked. There's an assumption you're a Christian anyway, being a foreigner, an American. Maybe a Chinese may not be assumed as a Christian, and so you have to work at it a little bit to prove that you're a Christian. Someone said, if you're accused of being Christian, do you have enough evidence to prove that they are right? And it's actually shame on us if we say, I'm a Muslim. It's shame on us. We're hiding Jesus. Christianos is the name of us in Greek, meaning, who is from the US? Anybody here from the US? So what do I call you? American. So if I was speaking Greek, I'd say Americanos. Christianos. Belong to, you're an American, I'm a Lebanese, you are Chinese, you are Hong Kongese, you are French, you are Saudi. That's what Christian means. I belong to Christ. And there's a lot of talk about, oh, it gives wrong impression, and Muslims have misunderstanding what a Christian means, and they think it is someone. In the Common Ground book, they say, oh, Christian to Muslims means immoral, drunk, crusader, and all kinds of. It's not true. In full honesty, and I'm not talking from an ivory tower, I'm one who's always with Muslims, every day of my life. I'm mixing with Muslims, talking with them, getting to know them, they getting to know me, witnessing to them, and whatever. And I know how many Muslims respect Christians. As I said the other day, this Kuwaiti woman, very sophisticated lady in her 40s, she was flattered that I say, you're talking like a Christian. Yeah, you know, I like Christians, and you know, thank you. She said, thank you. And I remember the wife of the Minister of Interior in Iraq, I was sitting in her living room, Muslim woman, and she had a maid coming and present me with drinks, tea and whatever I wanted. I don't remember what I drank that day. And I talked to her, and she had a Christian name. So I said, you have a Christian maid? She says, yes, I don't trust Muslims.
What?
I don't trust Muslims. She hired a Christian maid because she can trust her. There's an admiration of the freedom in Christianity. There's an admiration of technology. There's a lot of positive things. Now, politically, it's a different issue. As an American, you are liked as a person, but hated because of the political stand of your government. But people can make that distinction like you can. If you meet a Saudi, do you say, you villain, you are killing us all everywhere? You shouldn't. If you do, no, I don't think you would. In the same way, just go the other way, and people respect you and love you. That's why I started with minimizing the offense. So let me go quickly over this, finish it. The response is one of three: rejection, acceptance, or maybe reluctance. You can deal with all these. Acceptance is where you need to focus. You need to focus on those who are accepting. We had an amazing movement of God in the South Lebanon from 1994 to 98. We had teams, over 200 people. My whole family got involved in this. We were going village to village, home to home, leading people to Christ. Thousands of Shiite Muslims came to Christ in these 4 years. And Andre told you about when I was in Kana and the Imam wanted to debate me, and then he skipped town. He did not want to face me because he saw the popularity. People were welcoming us in their homes. Come and tell us. In fact, that day of the debate, when a trustee of the mosque invited us, they put chairs around his big courtyard. After I spoke for about an hour and sharing the gospel with him, he stood up, the owner of the house. He was a trustee. He says, I want to tell you something. Thank you for coming back to South Lebanon. When Christians left South Lebanon was left to destruction. We were destroying each other. And now you're coming back to South Lebanon is hope for peace to South Lebanon. What was he talking about? Is when the war broke in the 70s, Christians left the South, running away into Christian villages and towns, many of them. And there was a lot of fighting and killing and destruction. And then they saw us coming back, so they welcomed us. As you're coming back, Christians are coming back, at least to that town. So let's not have these assumptions that are erroneous and they're defeatist. And even if they're true, biblically we need to think victory. even if it's true. So when you have a number of people who have accepted, I call these groundbreakers, thinking about building. I will build my church. And there may be mixed motives among them. That's okay. As many numbers as you can gather together, that's good. You need to build momentum. That's why small home fellowships are good for intense, deep discipleship, but you need also a larger gathering of the public witness to encourage people to celebrate. And people with mixed motives are okay, you know, fill in the blanks, fill in those pews, it's all right. Nucleus, we start identifying leadership. There begin to be trust and a sense of belonging to each other, and that's you are beginning to operate as a community. And I don't have time to explain this, the 3 to 5, 9 to 15, 24, 27 to 45, but I basically put it this way, if you want to draw it. One circle, bigger circle, and a bigger circle. The inner circle is 3 to 5 people who are really the leaders. I'm sure, Mike, you can identify with this. You have 3 to 5 people who are the key people who are on your team. This is the team. These are the church pastor, leader, or church planter, elders, helpers, other missionaries trying to do the church planting. This is in the core. Those come every meeting, whether it's a prayer meeting, if it's a business meeting, if it's a worship, singing, any meeting, they'll come to that. They are there all the time. Then outside that are the faithful ones that they have connection with, they brought to the Lord, they prayed with them, they become their mentors, they'll stick. And they're there almost every meeting. Definitely to the Sunday or the Friday meeting, they're there, the main meeting. And then we have the larger one. These are more the ins and outs. They come in and out. That's a problem in all the beginning churches that we plant in any country. We have a core that's always there for 5 years, 10 years, you still find them there. But then those in the third circle, they don't stay long. At first they may come every week for a while, and then every other week, and then once a month, and then once every 3 months. They don't want to leave completely, and then 2, 3 years down the road, where are they? I don't know. They're gone. So what I propose is that we eliminate the third circle and keep only the first and the second circles. What does that mean? That means we need to split the group and have several home fellowships. It's like when we had small groups the last couple days. If you had only 3, you would have each one talk more. If you had 5, a little less. If you had 7, a little less. If you had 15, a lot less, and some will not even talk. Because you need involvement, and if you have a large group, the involvement level gets lower. That's just a principle that I'd like us to think about, is that as soon, and I followed that principle in Kosovo. I'd love to actually show you the slideshow from Kosovo, just to give you a real church planting movement that the Lord helped me. Last night I spent 2 hours writing a proposal for a foundation on Kosovo, so it's still fresh in my mind. I was up till 1 o'clock writing it, and now Kylie is working on fixing it and sending it. So the church becomes that community. There's initial excitement of forming it as a church, then power struggle starts. And then splitting starts, and conflicts will start. And there's sifting of the men from the boys, from the serious and those who are not serious, and then we move towards a new culture. So that's all I can do about the church planting talk.